Development Review Board will be held in the select board. We don't need all that.
Recording in progress.
So I'm not going to do the procedurally thing, right? All right, so are we going to continue the parking lot thing?
Yeah, they've hired an engineer, so they should be ready. If they're not ready for the next, I'll rewarn it just to put it out there to the neighbors.
Okay. So first off, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I would like to make a motion to approve the minute.
I will second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yep. And a motion to continue 2024-84 to the next DRB meeting in November.
I would like to make that motion.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so moved. So tonight we're going to have a little training session on the open meeting law. Take it away.
And before I do that, I think we're having a bit of an issue with the Zoom, so I might need to restart that real quick.
Okay.
Well, I have a unrelated question.
Sure.
I'll wait for that. So in this section that we always have at the end of the agenda, administrative matters and new business,
Yep.
how much does new business cover actually discussing? I mean, I know we're not going to be discussing cases in that, but if it's not administrative matters, what is that actually covering? And then depending on what I'm wondering if this might inform with planning commission meetings, can I just put new business at the end of the agenda and then that will cover us talking about some things at least lightly that the public doesn't even know we're going to talk about?
I don't think so.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you want to err in just transparency.
Yep.
So new businesses, as I understand it, is things like you suggested where you thought we should reconsider what time we met, or
So it's kind of being synonymous with administrative matters or just like new proposals or ideas related to admin.
yeah, even to the running of the board, not to any particular
Right.
issue. Would
Okay.
be my understanding. Otherwise, we'd want a specific wording
Yeah.
so people.
Okay, that's the way I interpreted it, but then, just some boards like the select board have old business and all the agenda items, and then new business being new agenda items they haven't seen yet, so just that similarity of language, just getting a little confusion.
I've got a question. Steve sent out something about all the areas in town that aren't going to be under Act 250 jurisdiction anymore. That was something you sent out, a week or so ago.
After the DRC meeting. Yeah, that I had sent out to the DRC as well as Michael, who was there, but other folks might not have seen that.
Right. Anyway,
Yes.
anyway, does that mean that it falls upon us to make sure that the applicant is doing stuff like stormwater permits, making sure that they check with the archaeology folks? I mean, that was when I did Act 250 applications for people. We had to turn in, I think it was like a dozen sets of drawings to the to Act 250, and they would go through and they'd keep 4 of them for themselves, and then they'd distribute the other 8 to all the interested state departments that might want to comment on them, and then they'd give them, 30 days to review them, and if you didn't hear back from them in 30 days, they were good with it, but usually you heard back from them on the 29th day. But that was, and they would say, oh, well, yeah, I'd like to come out and take a look at it. And they'd come out and say, no self-respecting Indian would live out here. And along it would go. But is it, I guess that's what I'm questioning, is all those 8 departments that Act 250 sent things out to, are we going to be doing that?
So it isn't going to give up state permitting in its entirety, just Act 250 jurisdiction. So they'll still be doing state stormwater permits. They'll still need state wetlands permits. The state is also taking over a review of river corridors and flood hazard areas. We might be designated to do it.
But are they getting, do you have to get state wastewater permits anymore if you're doing municipal?
So far, yes, but they might change that in the future. They've examined whether residential projects should be able to just get the municipal allocation.
I mean, municipal, state wastewater permits were pretty simple. You had to go through and get the town engineer to bless it.
Which essentially is, which is why it's kind of redundant. But that if there is designation to the town level, it would only be for smaller projects and on town sewer and water.
But something like, archaeology and that kind of stuff is.
So archaeology, the new land use review board is going to make up some of the rules that will determine whether a town can qualify to be a tier 1A, which would allow us to take over all jurisdiction of Act 250 in certain areas of town. So they haven't made those rules. We don't know if they're going to require anything for archaeology or archaeological sensitivity. If it's a federally funded project, of course, you're going to have to do some sort of environmental review, and that will include archaeological review. If it's a state-funded project, you'll probably need to at least do some sort of archaeological sensitivity.
I mean, even stuff like, Army Corps of Engineers, that kind of stuff.
Again, they're going to maintain jurisdiction. So a lot of this stuff, there's, like if you folks look at a flood hazard application, even if it's totally within the town's jurisdiction, I share it with the Rivers program, which is a requirement, so they can comment on it. So that process will still continue, so we'll be able to get that feedback.
But you know what I mean. I mean, should we be thinking about asking those type of questions?
No, you should only be thinking about what's required of your review under our regulations. We might need to expand what we review, but we'll have to look for guidance from the state on that.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, if we're going to take it on, I mean, there was, when I was doing it, there were I think there were 2 towns that were doing state wastewater permits. I think was it Charlotte and Colchester.
And I think one of them might have even given that up.
What's that?
I think one of them actually gave up that.
Well, the one in Colchester, she's now working for the state, so I don't know. That may have been them that gave it up.
So, I mean, the way to look at this is it's tight. Basically, the designated districts, which is what's going to turn into our tier 1 should we get approved for it. You can see it as a kind of master permitting process where you go through prior to any application and say, okay, there's sufficient municipal infrastructure here to support development. There aren't areas with real ecological sensitivity. There aren't river corridors. There's not flood hazard areas. Other areas that you would exclude because of their just really high ecological value. So tier 3, almost everything will be under Act 250 jurisdiction. Again, the rules haven't been made and won't be for a couple of years. That could be things like river corridors. It could be things like large wetland complexes. So the shores of the West River and retreat meadows, those could be a tier 3. We don't know. But, that would...
Now you say, I'm not quite sure what tier 3 means.
Sure. So there's going to be 3 tiers. Tier 1, and that's going to be divided into tier 1A and tier 1B. Tier 1A is something where towns with more capacity will be able to apply to the State Land Use Review Board to take over jurisdiction for Act 250. And basically, it will be the areas of the town with sewer and water service. You'll take over anything. There won't be any more Act 250 jurisdiction for those areas. If there are Act 250 permits with conditions, you'll have to look through those conditions. If you get a new application, and then apply them as conditions in your decision.
And,
Enforcement of those Act 250 permits will fall back onto the town.
okay, so
That's the
if,
new
if
part.
they have an Act 250 permit in place, that, they don't have to go back to Act 250 for new stuff? Or they do?
That is correct, they do not.
Do not?
Yep. Then there's tier 2, and that's areas that have less town services or none. And those will just continue under the same type of Act 250 jurisdiction that exists now. There's a study committee that's going to look and see if that permitting process should be altered in any way or re-examined. But again, that's a number of years out. Tier 3 is areas of really, really high ecological sensitivity. And with those, there won't be that 10-acre, 10-unit jurisdiction if you do land development. And again, it has to be defined what land development is in those areas. But if you do land development, it will be under Act 250 jurisdiction.
Okay.
And, that will probably almost certainly exempt things like agricultural uses, forestry uses, but
So you said-
again, those rules are forthcoming.
I didn't hear every word you said, but I thought I heard you say something about a 10-acre. Is that in tier 2?
So tier 2 will continue with the jurisdictional thresholds that exist now. So for a town with zoning and subdivision like Brattleboro, commercial development on 10 acres or more will be under Act 250
Okay.
jurisdiction. Or subdivisions of 10 parcels or more, or projects with 10 dwelling units or more, which includes things like hotels.
Did I miss you describing tier 1B?
Tier 1B, they will be able to, I haven't dug into this as much, Tom, because I don't think this is what we're going for. They'll be defined, instead of having an application directly to the Land Use Review Board, they'll be defined by the regional commissions.
No?
They will have jurisdiction, I think, on larger residential projects. I don't think they take over jurisdiction for commercial ones. So like if, here we have the hospital has an Act 250 permit. If we get tier 1A, then I think that's something we would take over future review with all the other state permitting. But, tier 1B town, they would do large residential projects, but not things like hospitals. Again, so the rulemaking.
More to come.
Yeah, the rulemaking, the application is supposed to go in 2028. The rulemaking is supposed to be done by 2028. So we'll see. But in the meantime, there's a bunch of exemptions for the transition period. So
Usually are.
yeah, so for designated districts, it's 75 housing units or less are under town jurisdiction. For areas in the sewer and water district that are priority housing projects, 20% units are affordable. Those would also be exempt. There's an exemption for village centers,
That's 50 units.
50 units, yeah. Yeah. So a lot of the development we're getting right now is in those exempt categories.
All right, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
That would be new business.
That's no business.
Well, it seemed like we're waiting for this thing to load the whole time. Or Steve just has it minimized politely.
So, what I think I'm gonna have to do is put our document over here, and this isn't being shared with the Zoom, and unfortunately, Jordan is out in the cold, so to speak, because I can't let him into the Zoom because of our problems, so he'll have to watch this after the fact. But if we can get what's on the screen, that would be probably helpful.
You can give them the presentation.
Oh, great. Okay. So we will just skim through. This is a presentation covering open meeting law by the Cities and Towns, the League of Cities and Towns. It is a few years old, so there is also, oh no. There is also a addendum as for what was changed in the last legislative session. But the punchline on that is that this board was already following all of the things that became required of boards like this one. So there isn't really anything that needs to be changed or anything that wouldn't already be familiar. So let's go through. Open meeting law is defined in statute, and it is something that applies to this board because it is a public board for a municipality. So whenever there's a quorum of members of that board and they're meeting for the sake of discussing the business of that board, it's a meeting. So we're having a meeting right now. They have this little, I think everybody's probably familiar with the concept of a quorum here because of times when we've been unsure if we'll have one, but in the event that anyone is not familiar, it's the majority of the voting members of a board.
Like we have a quorum now.
Exactly, yeah. Or if we had only 3 of the official members, or whatever the term is, and we had an alternate or both alternates, those would still be voting members because they can be appointed to hear a case. So as long as we have 4. I don't actually know what the purpose of them including these photos were, but if there are one-way communications, like over email about scheduling the meeting, that is kosher as far as open meeting law. Hitting reply all or crosstalk about the business itself is not above board as far as open meeting law. So unless in a meeting, we should be restricting ourselves to talking about scheduling the next meeting and things like that. It's pretty pro forma for this board though, so we probably won't have to worry about discussing scheduling very much. It's a lot of text, but if you guys were all at the same place, like RTM or I don't know, the
Christmas party.
yeah, that is not, no one's going to call the police as long as you're not, huddled in a corner talking about business ex parte, because then that would technically be a meeting. So I don't think any of this is going to be new. We have to warn the meeting, which includes the agenda. And we have to allow the public in here and let them have public comment. And after the meeting, then we need to provide minutes for the public to review. And there's a little more between the lines on exactly how much time we have to do those things.
Can you go back to that?
Mm-hmm. Is this visible to everyone? Probably should ask
That's
that.
Can you
better.
see it okay?
Yeah, now I can. That's better.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So yeah, there's shorter notice required for a special meeting and much shorter for an emergency meeting, but I don't think that particularly applies to almost any board except for the select board.
They don't apply to DODs, we're on those different sections.
Okay. As far as I'm aware, the first 2 where regular meeting is 48 hours and the special meeting is 24, that's all identical though?
So we're under a special provision for boards.
Right.
So it's a minimum of 7 days for certain types of hearings and 15 days for others.
Yes, the planning commission, that would be true. But yes, we have quite a lot of warning time that we need to give. So pretend you didn't see this. This was made for select boards, I think. Okay, so Once again, we need to allow for the public to be here if they so choose, and that does include Zoom, and also allow for public comment to be made. So, let's see. Okay, this actually is up to date. I thought this was from 2018, but this is generally up to date. In 2022, it became allowed that public participation could be done through Zoom. I think we're all, of course, aware of that. As of 2024, it's now the case that I believe this board needs to make an electronic meeting available because of its the opposite of advisory. Okay, great. Because this is a quasi-judicial board that makes actually binding decisions, it is required by that new statutory change to actually have a hybrid meeting. I think it is possible to get an exemption from that for a specific meeting under certain circumstances, but I think we will encounter that later in this presentation. So one thing that can be done without the public, as we are all aware of, is deliberative sessions, and that is still the same after these statutory changes. So in the case that there needs to be a deliberative session, we do what we've done previously, which is close the electronic portion of the meeting and have the public leave, and then we close the hearing as soon as we're out of deliberation.
But for our purposes, if we do a site visit, that needs to be warned and public can go,
That's my understanding.
right?
Yeah, the fact that this says it doesn't apply to site inspections seems a bit odd to me. But I think it's always good practice to act as if open meeting law applies anyways.
Yeah, so site visits are a little bit weird because even though you're looking at things and taking in information, you're not taking testimony. So nothing that you discuss there, and really you shouldn't be discussing anything. You could ask some questions, but not anything that's like a deliberation.
Well, I'm thinking, we traditionally have done site visits before a meeting, but now it's going to be too dark
Right.
to do that. So we think maybe on a Saturday or some other time when,
Well, if I remember correctly, one of the things we try to tell public that shows up at site visits is that they can't really say much.
Yeah, that's right. So whatever you take in at a site visit that's relevant, you introduce it as testimony at the public hearing so everybody has a chance to comment on it. And use that information in your decisions to make findings.
So if other people show up, we have to tell them, come to the meeting and tell us then.
Exactly. They might want to point something out to you like, look at how steep this road is.
Or look at that corner post.
Yeah.
right,
Yes.
which has
The corner
happened.
post.
Yeah.
But then if then you have to, during the actual hearing, you have to say, well, at our site visit, it was pointed out that the road is quite steep, and you can discuss it and see if you agree that it's quite steep, and then you can use that as a basis in your decision. The roadway is too steep to support this.
So then, yeah, this is the difference between executive and deliberative sessions. I think we can move past that. The select board would have an executive session, this board wouldn't. But we will have deliberative sessions from time to time, and we're familiar with those. So I think we're all familiar with this, at least in practice as well. Okay, so in the event that we did inadvertently violate some part of open meeting law, a member of the public can file a complaint that we may have violated open meeting law. And if we did indeed violate some part of it, then what we need to do to respond to that is cure the actual violations and write, I believe we have a responsibility to also make a statement on how we will avoid repeating that mistake. I'm not sure that I've seen that occur for us, at least as far as
I
I've
can't
been
hear you, sorry.
Steve was saying he can't recall that that's happened with us.
With us. So who, if there's a complaint made against us, who actually determines if we did violate or not? Who is the decider? Or we just like examine our conscience and say, well, I did, or I didn't, or whatever.
Ultimately,
Everybody
the
takes their
Secretary
word.
of State can make that determination, but towns are supposed to take that on and do the first analysis.
Okay,
And for your work, if you folks made an error and it went to environmental court, they could remand it and have you do a new hearing that was compliant with open meeting law.
so it's really like if it goes up, it goes to the environmental court, whether we did or didn't violate. the
If
law.
it could, if you had a violation that impacted a hearing, yes, definitely. Other violations might just be this process that's been newly established.
All right. So then, in addition to that, we've got a handful of new items. Let me see if I can make this bigger for you guys.
Thank you. Read it.
So essentially, the difference with okay, well, oh no. The major change that occurred since that previous presentation is essentially to make the temporary exemption for hybrid meetings or fully remote meetings, which was based on an emergency power for during COVID times. That's now just permanently available. And for advisory boards, which this board is not, but say the Planning Commission, the Conservation Commission,
Or the DRC?
yes. Those boards could choose to have a fully remote or a fully in-person meeting still. Although I believe if a member of the public makes a accessibility related request, then there would need to be a pretty great reason why that couldn't be accommodated. But for this board, I believe it is required that we have both be available. It's also required that we record with audio and visual all of our meetings, but we have been doing that, so that won't be any different.
Well, and that's what you were saying with the DRC, that isn't required, that gets recorded.
Right. We still generally have been recording all of our meetings in any case, but now for boards that are quasi-judicial, it's required regardless. But since we've been doing that, we won't have to make any changes. anything off here.
Mm.
That's essentially the only real difference, and for us it won't be different. Any questions on any of that? All right.
So we're fulfilling our annual training requirement here?
Yeah, it's the town's policy that all boards and committees review open meeting laws, preferably at their first hearing of the new year. But
Do we get a stamp on the way out?
Sticker.
not yet.
Not-
Okay.
All right.
So I think that's everything for tonight. We will be having hearings next month, so it'll be more interesting, and yeah, I think we're going to be having some really meaty applications coming up.
Good.
That is good.
There.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
vote to adjourn.
I will second.
Motion
Do
to
you have
adjourn.
any administrative or new business?
Well, the top of the agenda is.
Oh, I did.
What? Not on mine.
Well, you have to make a
Let me check.
motion to adjourn.
Oh, it looks so different though. Oh, is that the minutes or that's
No, I
Yeah.
that's last meeting's
was
minutes?
a newbie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I move to adjourn.
Do we have a
I'll
second?
second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
and